You are listening to the Centropic Oracle, an audiobook podcast of science fiction and fantasy short stories that make you think and feel.
Death's Playlist by Gaylord. I saw death come for my little brother. Jeffrey had been sick for so long. I think Mom and Dad knew what was coming. They told me he would get better, but they were just trying to protect me. Jeffrey and I shared a room. Maybe Death didn't know that. I don't know what woke me, but when I opened my eyes, he was standing over my little brother's bed. He was just like you'd expect. A tall, hunched figure, cloaked in black, sickle in hand. I wanted to say something, to tell him to leave my brother alone, but the aura of fear and inevitability that radiated from the figure kept me silent. I saw Death reach out a bony finger and touch Jeffrey's forehead. I saw my little brother's head loll to the side. I saw the swirl of black robes as Death glided out the door. I also saw what he left behind. It was small, black, and shiny. I knew what it was right away, as any child of my generation would. I went to my brother first and found Jeffrey as cold and unmoving as I had expected. Then I went and picked up the MP3 player. It too was cold to the touch. I scrolled down the playlist. It had all the artists you would expect. Plenty of classical music mixed with the likes of Black Sabbath and Megadeth. It also had plenty of names you might not expect. The Beatles, John Mayer, and Taylor Swift. Except for the classical, it actually reminded me a bit of my own playlist. I put the device in the pocket of my pajamas, then went and got my parents. They were shaken, but resigned. My mom cried. My dad didn't. I didn't tell him about death, or the iPod. Adults don't believe in that kind of thing. They wouldn't understand. The next couple of days were a blur. Lots of phone calls, lots of relatives I hadn't seen in years trying to say the right things. The funeral was too long, and an aunt I don't think Jeffrey ever met cried way too loud. The night of the funeral, I didn't sleep. I waited with the iPod on my bedside stand. At some point in the night, I felt that same atmosphere of resigned terror settle over the bedroom. I picked up the iPod as he approached from the shadows. Death reached out a skeletal hand and pointed at the iPod. I made as if to give it back, but then stopped. I shook my head. He jabbed his finger at the device. Again, I refused. This time, when Death reached out his finger, it was pointed at my forehead. The massive figure loomed over my bed. His deadly bony appendage slowly neared my skull. Just short of my skin, so close that I could feel cold radiating off it, Death stopped. It wasn't my time. He couldn't take me. There were rules about this sort of thing. Death lowered his hand and stood for a long moment. He pointed at the iPod again. This time, as I shook my head, I gestured across the room. Death turned and regarded Jeffrey's empty bed, then turned back. He reached out his hand again, this time holding up a single finger. I shook my head. Death held up a second finger. Again, I shook my head, this time pointing to the calendar on the wall. Death lowered his hand and regarded me for a long moment. The black cloak nodded, and he held out his hand once more. I returned his iPod. I made a deal with Death. Now, 20 years later, I sit in an empty hotel room halfway across the world. I'm nervous about being so far from home, but I shouldn't be. It doesn't matter where I am. He always finds me. I adjust the package sitting on my lap. I should be downstairs, mingling with clients. But not tonight. I have a far more pressing meeting to attend. It's not long before that same cold terror I can never get used to settles over the room. A dark hooded figure steps out of the shadows, and I stand, package in hand. We're about the same height. "Hello," I say. He doesn't reply. He never does. Instead, he steps aside. From the folds of his robes, a small child bursts out into my arms. "Hello, Jeffrey. I brought you a present." He smiles and takes the package with the unfettered enthusiasm of never-ending youth. Death withdraws. He'll return in an hour, like clockwork, and my visit with Jeffrey will be over. But I'll see him again next year, and the year after, and every year until Death's final visit when I join my little brother for good. That was the deal, and Death lives up to it.
We hope you enjoyed Death's Playlist by Gaylord, read by Kenneth Tynan. If you'd like to make a donation to the author and narrator of this story, check out the story page link in the description and click the PayPal donate button, or pledge your support to us directly on Patreon. Would you like to submit a story to the Centropic Oracle? A link to our submission guidelines can be found in the description.